Hello, everyone. My name is Suwenda Lewis. I am from the Early Learner Coalition of Broward County, and today I'm going to be presenting to you guys strategies to minimize behaviors in the preschool classroom. So thank you for joining me, and we will proceed. Just a few housekeeping before we begin. I just want to let you guys know that you guys have the chat box. If you click on the chat icon at the top of the toolbar, you can send messages by using the drop-down menu to select everyone. If you select everyone, that'll be all participants. We'll see your messages in the chat panel. If you click organizer only, all organizers will only be able to see your messages. And then you can also find individual attendees that's currently on the call and click their names, and therefore you can send messages to them individually. Also on the toolbar, we have our hands out. If you see the tab that says handouts, you can drop it down and you'll see that there's a few handouts. It's on the toolbar. You tap on the icon and select the file to download. The file will download automatically, so please make sure you download the files before you exit this call today. This training today, my apologies. And then hand raising. If you have any questions, you'll see the little hand with the green arrow pointing up. At that time, when the hand raises, that means you have a question. I can call on to you, and hand down means that you don't have any questions. And of course, at the end of this training, certificates will be emailed to you within 2 hours of completion. Yeah, you'll automatically receive the certificate. All right, moving along. So, today's training objective, after you leave this training, you'll feel better equipped to decrease challenging behaviors and maximize engagement in learning. We're going to go over the classroom environment, strategies to implement in the classroom, the ABCs and functions of behaviors, and as well as behavior strategies based on the function of behaviors. All right, so first thing first, we're going to dive into the classroom environment. We're going to dive into this because this is very, very important and very crucial when trying to prevent challenging behaviors from arising in the classroom. When you walk into your classroom, one thing that it's important to understand is what exactly is it that you see and what is it that your kids are seeing. What areas are easily accessible? Where are your centers located throughout your classroom? If you were a child in your classroom, what would be the center you would be most interested in? And how long have the toys and material and areas been available for the children? Has it been a long time? Have kids become a little over it, or are they fresh and brand new and the kids are still excited to engage and play with these toys? These are some things that I want you to keep in mind. You don't have to answer these questions, but take a moment and think about that and visualize your classroom as we're going through this PowerPoint, and look at how you actually have everything lined up and set up in your actual classroom. So the environment factors in reducing challenging behavior. So there is a lot of environmental factors that we put into place in order to decrease challenging behaviors in the classroom. Some might consist of clearly labeled learning centers. When you have clearly learning labeled centers, it helps children feel organized and know what the center is for. Having a variety of centers of interest encourages exploration. They also help support your goals for children and provide opportunities for interaction. I want to always make sure there's also a variety of materials. When you have a variety of materials, offer children a range of choices. Duplicates of materials minimize sharing problems. That's a big one. Sometimes we walk into the classroom and we see that there's one of a toy in the classroom, and kids are arguing or going back and forth because they all want that one toy. It's important to be mindful that you have more than one of those popular toys, so that you're not forced to have to put the toy away, but you can actually have enough material so that the child or the kids that are in the centers have enough to go around. Rule of thumb, there should be 3 to 4 kids in each center. You can use center management strategies to aid you in doing so. Like I said, the duplicate materials minimize sharing problems, and have an opportunity in appropriate numbers of material provide opportunity for more meaningful play with the kids. Age-appropriate material enhance learning and avoid frustration. So you want to make sure that you always have age-appropriate material so that they're not too high and use that it's challenging for that child to use, and they're not too low that it doesn't interest the child. So you want to make sure that you have materials that are age appropriate for each kiddo in your classroom or for the age range that you're working with. And then another thing is children also benefit from an orderly classroom environment. Just as adults, we typically benefit from an orderly area, an orderly room, an orderly kitchen, wherever it is that we are, an orderly workspace. Our kids also benefit from having an orderly classroom environment. We know where there are things everywhere. We know where our glue's kept. We know where the marker's kept. We know where the construction paper is kept. And it's important for the kids to know these things and how they're grouped in the classroom. Kids can work more independently and help with cleanup and caring for their classroom. Labels should be consistent across the classroom, and they should also consist of pictures and words. Having these help foster that independence in our kiddos and help decrease challenging behaviors when teachers aren't able to assist the child as soon as the child would like. But if the child knew where to find things in the classroom, the child would be able to promote the independence and be able to gather things on their own. Another key important thing when we're discussing the actual environment and reducing challenging behaviors is making sure that children work and family pictures are displayed at eye level. When children can see their family pictures and their work at eye level, language development is increased during that time. As they have more opportunity, or they have the opportunity to share what they see or remember about items that are displayed, even when their parents come into the classroom or they're looking at pictures of family and they're explaining it to their classmates, they're able to recall information and talk about what's taking place and go through that whole language development over time. So these are some key things that are very, very important when we're talking about the environment factors in reducing challenging behaviors. So over here we have a few pictures of an actual classroom, and these are some of the things that I discussed previously in the previous slide. Having the labels with the words as well as the pictures, everything is organized. When the child walks into the classroom, it's not so overwhelming. It's clear. You can see where you're going. You can see where you're navigating. You can find materials. You want to go through, are there enough age-appropriate materials, the toys, the art supplies to go around? For example, if the block center holds 4 children, are there enough blocks for 4 children to build, as we talked about before, to build an adequate structure? Are there spots in the preschool classroom for the large group activities? You want to think about that. A place for children to be themselves, comfortable spots for reading or quiet play. Are there at least 4 to 5 centers available to that kid so that if they get tired of being at one center, they have the option to maneuver to another center? These are all things that we want to consider when we're looking into the preschool classroom. So here's another picture that we have here, and you see the labels as well. Like I said before, you see the 5 to 5 learning centers. You can go through dramatic play, the blocks, games, puzzles, art, sand and water, library, music. Those are all some ideas of centers. Another thing to keep in mind is, which is very, very important, are you using playtime to intentionally teach those social emotional skills? For example, helping aggressive child to ask another child to play in an appropriate way, or helping that child to foster that language instead of hitting another kid or biting another kid to gain access to what it is that they want from that child, a toy of any sort. You're using that time to teach communication in the appropriate way for that child to request a turn with the toy instead of acting out in a way that might be challenging. Another thing to consider during this time when we're talking about the classroom environment is circle time, interactive, engaging, and short. Typically when we're discussing circle time or teacher-led activity, I want to make sure that there are 15 minutes or less of seated activity for preschoolers. Unless they are highly, highly, highly engaged, then we can keep it going on and it does not have to be that short. But if they are not engaged and you notice that you do not have their attention, more than likely it's time for you to move on over to another activity that will gain the kids' attention. So one thing I want you to do is when you look at this picture, what do you see here? Does this, back to that question that I asked in the beginning, does this look like somewhere or a classroom that you would want to be in? When you look at the three different pictures, what is it that you can grab from and take into your classroom? And think about those ways that it's helping to limit challenging behaviors in the classroom between your students, because A, you have enough materials that's there, B, the children knows how to navigate and get what it is that they want in the classroom, and C, it's welcoming, it's not overwhelming, it's not frustrating, but it's there in an orderly fashion that we all like to see. All right, moving along. Next thing we have is the implementation of schedules and routines on reducing challenging behavior. Schedule and routines have a great deal of effect on reducing challenging behaviors altogether, whether it be in a classroom, outside the classroom, adult, child, the elderly, anyone that you can think of. Having schedules and routines help us better prepare for the day or what's to come ahead. And when we know what's to come ahead, we're able to gear or fashion ourselves accordingly without having any abrupt eruptions that may cause us to react in a way that might be acceptable. So things to consider. When children know what's expected of them, if they can see a visual picture schedule, it gives them a great sense of control and predictability. They're more apt to comply when they know what's expected of them, and that goes for adults as well. Once we know what's expected of us, we know how to comply with that. We know how to better adjust ourselves so that we can uh, gear the results that's expected of us. Another thing to consider is children know what's expected of them if pictures or rules are posted at eye level. They need to be taught which rules are expected and appropriate for the setting. So having those classroom rules posted and including the visual expectation is a great way to decrease challenging behaviors. And a lot of times you want to strip this off at either the ending of your circle time where you're teaching the new rules, where you have the students full focus and they have the capacity to listen to what it is that you're teaching them with the rules and you're going over it, and you have the visuals so they can see that and help develop those skill sets. Another thing to consider is transitional learning. They prepare children for up and coming events and limit challenging behaviors. Transitional learnings are offered to the entire class as a whole. So it's like when you're in a store and you went grocery shopping per se, and then right when you get to the register and you're taking off all your groceries, they tell you the store is closed and you can't get your grocery, but you didn't spend 15 minutes shopping and trying to get your groceries. No one offered you that morning, just as the child would be upset when you stop them in their tracks in their center time when were at the cusp of their learning and they were interrupted. That's how we as an adult grocery shopping and we put everything down and then they tell us that they're closed and they can't take us anymore. Just as well as we would get upset and frustrated, that's exactly how our kids feel when that center time is abruptly stopped without any warning. So it's great to provide those transitional warnings. Hey guys, we have 5 more minutes. You can use the timer in the classroom. You can use visuals just so that you can reinforce and prepare that child for what it is to come. So transitional warnings are great in decreasing challenging behaviors in the classroom because the kids are prepared for what's coming up and it limits the challenging behaviors. Also, teacher-directed activities are limited as children need time to follow their own interests. What is it that they like? Make their own choices and problem solve in order to develop the skills they need to be successful. We know that once we're doing something it is that we like and something it is that catches our attention, that helps us to be more involved and more engaged in what it is that we're doing. And when we're engaged, or even when children are engaged, you're less likely to see them involved in any challenging behavior because they're engaged in what it is that's taking place. So make sure that teacher-directed activities are limited to less than 20 minutes and that kids have choices and it matches their own interests in the classroom as well. All right, so here we have, of course, a visual of what's taking place here.
There are many different ways that we can demonstrate classroom visuals. As we spoke about it, this example shows how we can incorporate our children's faces when we're talking about the classroom helpers. We have another picture here that displays the classroom rules. As I stated before, you see that it has the rules paired with the actual visual to help build those early literacy skills for the kids that need the actual visuals to take place. Visual schedules are posted at eye level. It's a consistent and predictable daily schedule that is taught daily to the children. That's where that visual schedule comes from. This one is going up and down, but you can also do from left to right. When it is left to right, that visual schedule helps frame the prerequisites needed for reading because we typically read from left to right. And that's why having that visual schedule going the horizontal way can be beneficial. That either way works as long as it is eye level, it's including the pictures and the words that help the kids know what exactly is taking place. And that's the visual of the schedule there that you can use. And then are the children doing warnings, like I said, when it's time to transition, having that timer, having that bell, having that light switch, whatever it is that you use as that warning to allow kids the opportunity to process that something is ending, going from 5 minutes to 1 minute, and gradually counting down helps them. All right, so now we're moving on to our engagement in classroom management. So we went over the environment, we talked about the schedule and how the schedules and rules and how that has an effect on the overall challenging behaviors of our preschoolers. Now we're going to go into the engagement, that's the classroom management. So we want to make sure that teachers model appropriate skills and extend vocabulary and learning as they interact meaningfully at centers with children. We want to make sure teachers always engage with children at their center. We want to acknowledge children's efforts increases the chances that the desired behavior will continue. Acknowledge children when their behavior is appropriate. Keep in mind that large group activities are structured to actively engage children. If you notice that your children aren't engaged, that's typically when challenging behavior starts. So you want to make sure that the kiddos are always engaged during those large group times, and making sure that the teachers modeling appropriate skills and extending vocabulary and learning as they interact meaningfully with the children and interact with large group activities, maximize learning and minimizes challenging behavior. We all know that children learn through engagement and play. And another thing to keep in mind is the children's behaviors communicate their needs and desires. That's a big one. It communicates their needs and desires. Challenging behavior communicates disinterest and is a signal for the teacher to modify activity. So when you do see that challenging behavior, keep in mind and look at what it is that you're actually doing and what it is that's taking place and how are your kids signaling you. Because challenging behavior, like I said, communicates the disinterest and is a signal for the teacher to modify activities. Children only learn when they are actively engaged in what's taking place in front of them. You want to make sure that directions are simple, short, and stated positively. You want to tell the child what to do instead of what not to do. And then children need to feel like their classroom is safe. Children understand that positive before understanding the negative attributes. Since each child learns differently, making sure that you have accommodation to support each child's individual needs will help them learn and comply with directions and won't make learning so frustrating for them. It will help decrease the challenges when you do have an individualized lesson for kids that might require more support, more prompting, nonverbal or verbal prompts, or visual or auditory prompts. So those are some things to keep in mind when we're talking about engagement and classroom management. So here is a display here or pictures that's created on what's taking place, the amount of children in the center, teaching collaborations, and then using children to make sure that they understand the task. Students in these pictures are all actively engaged, and we can assume that the teacher provided clear expectation to the students. When considering engagement with students, want to make sure we provide choices and we prepare for alternative activities. If there is an interruption to the daily schedule, then that alternative is what's going to be beneficial for kids. Now, once all these things are incorporated into the classroom and it's every day, that should overall decrease the amount of challenging behaviors that is observed in the classroom. But on the other hand, we do understand that sometimes some children require a little more intense strategies to assist them through the challenges. So now as we move forward, we're going to go over a bit more specific strategies in regards to what comes next. Once you've laid out that foundation, you have that secure relationship with the students, the environment is set up how it's supposed to be set up. You have those extra resources such as the visual schedules and the rules, and then you move on and your engagement and your collaboration with the students is on par, but there's still that one or two student that you're struggling with, or you could use some additional assistance with. That's where this comes in. But before we go into, I want you just to think about your classroom and think about your daily interaction with your students. And I want you to think about which challenging behaviors challenge you the most. And go ahead and write it down. You can put one, it's the physical aggression or destruction, two, the tantrums and the meltdown, three, inappropriate words or action, or four, defiant refusal, or maybe five, there's another behavior that I did not discuss that challenge you a lot in the classroom. I want you to go ahead and level these of importance to you or which one you're dealing with the most. And as I go through and continue on with this training, highlight the different strategies that you might find useful in managing or assisting to decrease these behaviors that really challenge you in the classroom. So when we talk about the form and function, it's gearing us to understand the purpose of behavior. So what we know is that all behavior has a form and a function. We are focusing on two dimensions of communication, the form and the function. Every communicative behavior can be described by the form and the function of the communication. Once again, children that engage in challenging behavior because it works for them. There's a reason it works for them. They're getting something out of it, and that's why they're engaging in that challenging behavior. Challenging behavior results in a child gaining access to something or someone, obtaining a request, or they either avoid something or someone, and that's going to be the escape or the protest, which we're going to discuss a little further in a minute. All right, so keep in mind the form and the function. Communication piece is understanding the purpose of behavior. So, what is challenging behavior? We keep saying challenging behavior, challenging behavior, challenging behavior. What is that prerequisite for challenging behavior? What is actually defined as challenging behavior? Is it all behaviors we see? Is it some behavior we see? Is it the ones that frustrate me? The question is, what actually makes a behavior that challenging behavior? So, when we are referring to challenging behaviors, we are actually referring to any repeated pattern of behavior that interferes with learning or engagement in a pro-social interaction with peers and adults. Behaviors that are responsive to the use, that are not, I apologize, responsive to the use of developmentally appropriate practice, guidelines, and procedures, meaning that everything I just told you prior to about the environment, the secure attachment, the teacher, the interactions, that child just is not responding to what would typically be developmentally appropriate guidance for the child. And then you want to talk about behaviors that prolong tantrum, physical aggression, disruptive vocal or motor behavior, screaming, stereotypy, or property destruction, picking things up and tossing them or throwing them across the classroom, or just ruining things physically. Self-injurious, non-compliance, and withdrawal. These are all behaviors that are harmful to the child and others. So those are some things that we consider when we're referring to challenging behaviors, behaviors that are harmful to the child and others. And then when we talk about prolonged tantrums, physical and verbal aggression, disruptive vocal and motor behavior, like I said, the screaming and stereotypy. Those are all things to consider when we say challenging behavior. So we're going to look at the different kinds of behaviors that can be addressed using this process. Okay. So what do we want our children to do instead? We mentioned what challenging behaviors is and what it exhibits, but what we really want from our children, instead of engaging in these challenging behaviors, we want to build social emotional skills that have been identified as essential for success in school. And some of these social emotional skills that I'm talking about could be the ability to get along with peers. That's a long-term thing. Even as we grow into adulthood, we have to learn how to get along with peers. Persist at a task, even though something is difficult, the child will continue to persist or keep trying to get it correct because they have that social emotional skills. Want to make sure they're positively assess the self and others around them, and they have the willingness to try new things and take on different tasks and different risks throughout the classroom. They're able to identify and they're able to identify and regulate emotions and behaviors. And these, we want our kids to be able to follow directions. So this list here that we see is nothing like the previous list where we talked about the behaviors that challenge you the most. This is what we want instead of those behaviors that challenge you most. A key thing to think about uh, with that is remembering that these behaviors are here for a reason. And earlier in series 1 or 2 of the training, you guys talked about trauma. And one thing we have to remember is we have to shift our mind into what this child is going through, what has this child been through, and then be able to assist them in that matter. We're going to get a little deeper into that. But before I move on, what is positive behavior support? So positive behavior support is the strategies that we're going to use in order to help decrease these challenging behaviors after we really tried everything else that we felt is developmentally appropriate or would be considered best practice when dealing with challenging behaviors. So when we talk about positive behavior support or PBS, it's based on the assumption that children's challenging behavior has meaning. And it's an individualized approach to developing effective interventions for children with severe challenging behaviors. It's developed from the science of applied behavior analysis or behavior modification, and it incorporates the values of child-centered approaches, meaning the child is at the center of all of it. Some key principles of behaviors to remember is that all behavior is a form of communication. All behavior is learned. All behavior occurs for a reason, and all adults do have the capacity to learn and understand and interpret children's behavior. I love this quote that I have. It says, understanding why a kid is challenging is the first and most important part of helping them. If you don't understand or know why the child is the way that they are, or why that child is challenging, then you can't necessarily, or you do not necessarily have the tools, or you may have the tools, but you wouldn't know which tools to use to help them. So it's important to understand why a child is challenging in the first place, and then be able to provide the help that they need. All right, moving on. So now we're moving into a part of our training that has to do with data collection. We're dealing with trying to understand the challenging behaviors of a child. We want to look at the ABCs of their behaviors. And when I say the ABCs of their behaviors, I'm talking about the antecedent. A, that's the antecedent. What happens just before the behavior occurs? Who, what, where. That could be anything that happens prior to, anything that happens before the child even arrives to school. That's something that's called the setting event. It could have been medication, the child didn't get breakfast at home. Those are all things to consider when we're talking about this. Then B is behavior. It describes exactly what you see. And it always states the fact, not impressions. Not you thought Charlie was angry, but it's more so as Charlie stumped and had a frown on his face and his fist balled up. That shows that the child is angry. It's not just so subjective, but it's more objective of what's taking place. So that's the behavior, exactly what you see. And then we talk about C. C is the consequence. It's what do adults and others do when the behaviors occur? What does the child get out of it? What does the child get or get out of exhibiting that challenge in behaviors? So this is what we call our ABCs of behaviors. And I did mention setting events. Once again, setting events is anything that happens prior to even coming in contact with antecedents. Could be things such as medication. Could be things such as the child didn't sleep too well at night. It could be the parent didn't provide the child with breakfast, and when the child came to school, the child was already crying. Sometimes it only takes a good 5 minutes or even 3 minutes to talk to the parent in the morning to have an understanding of what it is that your child's been through so that you know how to approach the day with that child. Sometimes taking that time frame and talking to that parent can limit some very, very serious challenging behaviors that you might come across throughout the day. Now we're going to move into our scenario. We talked about the ABCs of behavior, the antecedents, the behaviors, and the consequence. So I'm going to read you guys the scenario, and we're going to just go ahead and discuss the ABCs of this scenario and discuss why each portion falls into each category. So here we have Tommy was told to go to the bathroom to wash his hands. He screams, runs to the other side of the room, and drops to the ground kicking. His teacher runs after him. When he drops and kicks at her, she backs off and waits him out. So that's our scenario. So we have Tommy, who's told to go to the bathroom. He screams, runs to the other side. He drops to the floor, starts kicking. His teacher runs after him. And when she finally gets him, he drops, kicks at her. You know what she does? She backs up and she waits him out. All right, so now we're going to discuss the ABCs of Tommy behavior. So antecedent, like we said, anything that happened prior to the behavior taking place. So in this scenario, the antecedent was Tommy was told to go to the bathroom to wash his hands. So that was the very first thing that happened. Tommy was told to go to the bathroom to wash his hands. The behavior in this scenario would be he screams, runs to the other side of the room, and drops to the floor kicking. It's clear. We all see that. We can visualize that. We see Tommy running and screaming to the other side of the room and drop into the floor kicking. Very, very clear, as our behavior should be. And then the consequence, what happened as a result of Tommy doing this? So the consequence in this scenario would be his teacher runs after him. When he drops and kicks at her, she backs off and waits him out. So that would be the consequence, anything that happens afterwards. So this is how we develop our ABCs of behaviors. And then as a behavioralist, we come in and we collect this information over time. It's not just one incident, it's not just two incidents, it's not just three incidents. We like to have about a good 6 to 10 different instances across the days and across different time frames, so we can start analyzing our student behaviors or Tommy behaviors to see why it is that Tommy is engaging in these behaviors and what different patterns can we pick up so that we're better equipped to assist Tommy or the teacher in conquering the behaviors that's being exhibited. So I want you to keep the ABCs of behaviors in the forefront of your mind as we continue on with this training. The next part we're moving into is something that is called the primary function of behavior. Remember, we talked about the principles of behaviors, and we said that all behavior is learning, all behavior is a form of communication. So now we want to figure out the function of behavior. So when we say function of behavior, meaning we want to know exactly why is this behavior happening and what is maintaining it. What is this behavior trying to tell me and why is it being exhibited? So there are 4 functions of behaviors. We have escape and avoidance. You can escape from a person, task, or an environment. A behavior usually occurs in response to a specific person, event, or request to perform an activity, meaning you escape it. If little Billy doesn't want to do his math, do the math question the teacher calling him, instead of answering the math question, he yells out some remark that is disrespectful, and the teacher sends him over to the principal office. Little Billy never had to answer the math question, so he avoided or escaped that altogether by getting himself in trouble and having to go to the principal office. So that's an example of what escape avoidance. might look like. When we talk about tangible or activity, it's a desire for a specific item or an activity. Behaviors often occur when something has been denied or taken away. It's not person or event specific. So that's intangible activity, meaning you just want something no matter what and who has it, you want it. So that's one function of behavior. And then we have attention. That can be positive or negative attention. Attention is a desire for attention from peers, adults. It can include power. Behaviors usually occur when a specific individuals are present. Maybe all the time if the desire is for the attention from peers. It is person specific, not event or location specific. When we're talking about attention, it has to do with an actual individual and wanting attention from that individual, whether it's positive or negative. When I say positive, whether it's attention for saying, Tommy, great job, or attention for saying, Tommy, uh, please stop drawing on the wall. Those are all forms of attention, whether it's positive or negative, as long as you're providing attention. And then lastly, but not least, we have sensory. Sensory is the behavior that feels good or meets a sensory need. Behaviors occur at any time, it doesn't matter, anywhere, and it's not person or event nor location specific, but may occur more often when under stress. An example of a sensory or something that serves as a sensory is sucking your thumb. People tend to suck their thumbs, adults and child, some adults still do it, as a form of sensory. It doesn't matter who's there or who's not there, it meets an internal need for that individual. So that's what's considered the sensory. So these are the four functions of behavior. All right. So now we're going to go back to our example that we had earlier. We had Tommy, and we discussed the ABCs of Tommy's behavior. Antecedent was Tommy was told to go to the bathroom to wash his hands. The behavior was he screams and runs to the other side of the room and drops to the ground kicking. And the consequence in that scenario, if you guys remember, was his teacher runs after him when he drops and kicks at her. She backs off and wakes him out. So now that we have the ABCs, it's time to figure out what is the possible function of the behaviors. And when we talk about function, it's everything that we just discussed. It can be escape, avoidance, tangible, attention, positive or negative, or sensory. So reading the scenario, and I can go back to the scenario for you guys. Let's read it again to try to figure out what is the actual function of Tommy's behavior. So Tommy was told to go to the bathroom to wash his hands. He screams, runs to the other side of the room, and drops to the ground kicking. His teacher runs after him. When he drops and kicks at her, she backs off and wakes him out. So what do you guys think is the function of, when I put this up, the function of Tommy's behavior? Is it escape avoidance? Is it tangible? Is it attention? Is it sensory? Here's our ABCs once again. And our function, yes. In this scenario, the function of Tommy's behavior could be, and I say possible function because typically we need a full range of data collection of ABCs to have an understanding. So this is possible function because it's only one scenario and it's one snippet. So a possible function based off the information that was gathered could be escape. Tommy was given direction to go to wash his hands. When that direction was given, he immediately screams and runs to the other side of the room and drops to the ground kicking. His teachers run after him and he drops and kicks at her. She backs off and wakes him up. So in this scenario, Tommy escaped it altogether. He never had to come in contact with washing his hands. A lot of times people will say that a possible function is attention. Why is it attention? Because the teacher provided attention when she told Tommy to go to the bathroom. If it was attention that he was seeking at that given moment, he got it. So there was no need to embark in any behavior because he had some positive attention that was given to him. Some may argue that it's sensory. It could be sensory, but we don't know. We would need some more information. Tommy never came in contact with the water or the soap or anything of that nature to say that it's sensory taking place. All we know is that he was told to go to the bathroom before he even had that opportunity to go. He began to engage in this behavior and he never had to follow through with it. So that's why in this example, it would be escape as the possible function. So those of you that got that correct, go ahead and give yourself a round of applause. Great job. All right, moving forward. So now that we know the ABCs of the behaviors and we figure out the possible function, it's now time to put strategies in place to better equip us or assist us in managing these behaviors in the classroom. It's time to be proactive. So punishment only tells the child what to not do. As far as prevention strategies reduces the likelihood that the child would need or even want to use challenging behaviors. All right, so keep that in mind. We want to be proactive. Punishment only tells the child what not to do. It doesn't tell the child what to do. It says what not to do. All righty, excellent. So here we have here is a functional behavioral analysis and a behavior intervention plan development. So once we have our antecedent, our behavior or consequence, the antecedents what's happening before, the behavior is what's happening during, and the consequences what's happening afterwards, we're able to take this and build a foundation for a behavioral intervention plan. So when we look at our antecedent, we want to prevent challenging behaviors from occurring in the first place. So an example of this is Tommy comes to school crying. So you know what? Let's stick to Tommy and washing his hands. You want to prevent it. Let's say that you know that Tommy does not like going to the bathroom for one way or another. A way to prevent that is asking him, do he want to use hand sanitizer or a wet nap to clean his hand instead of having to actually go to the bathroom and wash his hand with the soap and water. Yes, that may be preferred, but at this point in time, you just want his hands clean, and the hand sanitizer or the wet nap would equally be able to meet the need of washing the child's hands. You want to teach new skills. Instead of Tommy falling to the ground, kicking and screaming, we want to teach communication skills or teach communication skills to have Tommy express, hey, I don't want to go into the bathroom or I don't want to go on their type communication so that he's better equipped. When teaching new skills, we just want to always make sure that it's in that child's repertoire, meaning if you're teaching skills that have to do with communication, that indeed that child knows how to communicate. And then when we talk about the consequence, we want to respond in ways that reinforce new behaviors, that do not reinforce challenging behaviors, and it prevent further escalation of the uh, challenging behavior from occurring. So once we get our ABCs, this is what we use, and this is what we do to prevent, teach, or respond in new ways that makes our children more successful. So this quote here is one that I really, really love. It says, disciplining kids without considering the cause of their problem behavior is like dispensing medication to people without searching for the cause of their symptoms. So one thing I always like to tell you that if you have a headache, but someone is giving you Pepto-Bismol, it's not going to cure your headache or it's not going to alleviate your headache because they're dispensing the medication without really knowing what's wrong with you. And so they can keep on dispensing medications, but until they really know what's wrong with you, they won't be able to treat the actual problem. So disciplining kids without considering the cause of the problematic behavior is like dispensing medication to people without searching for the cause of their symptoms. So that's one thing to keep in mind moving forward. All right. All right. Identifying replacement behaviors. Replacement behaviors are very, very important because just as well as we're trying to take away a behavior, it's equally important that we still meet that child's needs and we're teaching them ways to exhibit the correct behavior or still get their needs met using a different behavior that's more appropriate. When choosing a replacement behavior for the target behavior, it's best to choose behaviors that are already seen in the child's behavior repertoire or require very little teaching so that the child can access the reinforcement with the least amount of effort needed. Replacement behavior must be observable and measurable as the definition of the target behavior. So when we talk about replacement behaviors, an example would be reinforcing praising, raising hands versus shouting out. So you want to make sure that that child can indeed raise hands before we start reinforcing raising hands. They both have a need that wants to be met, wanting to say something, but praising the child for raising their hand is more appropriate than having that child shout out in the classroom. All right. So that's what we talk about when we talk about replacement behavior. It's still something that's equally uh, meets the need for that child, but one is more appropriate than the other one. So in order to take away shouting out in the classroom, we have to teach that replacement behavior of raising their hand so that child can still get his or her needs met. Alrighty, so that's replacement behavior. So now that we have went over the ADCs and the functions of behaviors, now I'm going to give you guys some strategies or some tools that you can use based off the function of a child's behavior to actually implement these strategies. A lot of times we hear that teachers have tried this and tried that and tried everything, but have you actually tried strategies based off the function of that child behavior? Are you dispensing medication for what's actually wrong with the individual to treat what's actually wrong with them? So this is what this part of the presentation is going to assist you with, is providing strategies based off specific functions of the behavior. So when we talk about gaining attention or the function of wanting attention, things to consider is schedule adult attention. Have an adult work with the student. Have adult periodically provide attention helps with this and decreasing challenging behaviors. It increases positive interaction with student and provide increased specific praise for appropriate behavior. We want to schedule peer attention. You can do this by pairing student with a peer or use their peer tutoring or peer buddy approach in the classroom. You want to increase proximity to students. Sometimes the student just needs you closer to them in the classroom. You can move seating arrangements periodically, move throughout the classroom and walk around the classroom so that you do have access, definitely, or that student have access to you so they do have attention from you. You want to provide preferred activity. When an adult is occupied and unable to provide attention to the student or individual, assign a more preferred activity, something that's engaging, so that child is almost taken away from the attention that he or she needs, and that they're fully engaged and distracted by what it is that they're doing. And remember that we know that when kids are fully engaged in something, that's when the optimal learning takes place anyhow. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. So these are some strategies that you can use when the function of the behavior is attention. Now, moving towards the function of the behavior being escape, task, or environment. When it has to do with that, listed are a few strategies that you can do. You can sometimes adjust the demand difficulty. What does that mean? Is provide easier work and decrease the amount of work that you're giving to your kids at that given moment of time. Sometimes it might be too overwhelming, so decreasing it and giving bit by bit might assist with decreasing the behavior in classroom. You want to allow students to choose, have choice, which task to complete, the sequence of tasks to be completed, which material to use, where to complete the task, when to complete the task, or with whom they may want to complete the task. When we have children, when we allow to have children to choice, when we allow children to have choices, that helps decrease behaviors. At the end of the day, that choices as being picked aligns with what it is that we want from the child anyhow. So offer choices as much as possible. You want to increase students' preference, interest, and activity. So we want to include children's hobbies or interests all together in activities. Remember that we mentioned earlier, when children are actively engaged, that's when they're at their optimal learning. And when they're engaged, mostly the time there isn't any room for challenging behaviors. You want to make sure that activities are functional or relevant for the student. Provide a rationale for school tasks or activity that is relevant to the student's everyday life or future goals. Use functional tasks to teach appropriate or practice academic skills so that there's a reasoning for this and it's not just rote and you're just going through the lesson. Make sure that it's actually functional and it correlates with that student life or have some type of benefit thereof. You want to alter the length of the task, meaning we talked about the circle time or we talked about teacher-led activities, making sure that things are not going too long that the child is drained out and is no longer to provide that interest in what's taking place. And you want to modify the mode of task completion, meaning allow the students to choose between the response. It can be something oral, it can be something written, it can be something typed, it can be something verbal. It doesn't always just have to be paper and pencil. So keep in mind you can modify that. You can use different materials. You can have more of a hands-on approach. Those are all things to consider when a child has the function of escape the task or environment. Continuing on with escape task or environment, you want to use something that's called behavioral momentum or task reversal. Allow a break when the problem behavior has not occurred for a specific period of time and place the problem behavior on pause. Ignore the problem behavior and continue presenting the task regularly, even if the problem behavior do occur. You want to increase predictability, like we said before. You want to provide breaks from work on a time-based schedule for that child as well, and then allow the break from instruction, as I said before. Allowing a break when the problem behavior has not occurred for a specific period of time will help decrease the amount of challenging behavior that is taking place. Uh, the D in RA is the differential negative reinforcement of alternative behavior, meaning if a child's not engaged in that behavior and that negative or challenging behavior, you want to go ahead and reinforce them or provide them praise for not engaging in it. And non-contingent escape, meaning that we provide those breaks automatically so that child does not have to engage in escape behaviors. We're just automatically providing those breaks to that child. All right, so tangible and activities. And we talked about the function of behaviors being because of tangible activity. We want to make sure we schedule a transitional activity for that child. We want to make sure we increase accessibility, provide the desired item or activity when the problem behavior has not occurred for a specific period of time and place the problem behavior on pause. You want to schedule a moderate preferred activity between high preferred and highly non-preferred activity, meaning not just so much of what the child don't want to do. You want to intersperse the high desired task with some low desires, or the harder task with some of the easier tasks. You want to put them within each other so it's not just hard, or easy. You want to intersperse them so that there's a nice portion going on for each of them. We want to make preferred activities more frequently available to that child so that they have that increased accessibility. And same as before, you want that differential reinforcement of alternative behaviors and that differential reinforcement of other behavior. When we talk about the DRA, it's providing the desired item or activity contingent on an alternative appropriate response and place the problem behavior on pause. When we talk about the DRO, it's us providing the desired item or activity when the problem behavior has not occurred for a specific period of time. So let's say during recess time, that child has not pushed another child on a slide within 5 minutes. You want to go ahead and provide them with some attention or an activity or something that it is that they like because they have not engaged in that behavior. Or with the DRA, if they requested that that child move, please, instead of pushing them down the slide to get by, you want to reinforce them for saying move, please, and that's what that DRA is referring to. And then lastly, when we talk about the function, the last one, sensory, we want to provide alternative sensory reinforcement for our kiddos. We want to offer stimuli matching the type of sensory reinforcement that is maintaining the problem behavior. We have auditory, visual, or tactile. Those are different ways that we can incorporate stimulatory materials. Materials in our class, what we're using, that goes back to the mode of ways that the kids have to complete tasks, making sure that their environment is enriched. Fill the environment with interesting and stimulating objects and activities so that it can meet some kids' sensory needs in the classroom. So there you have it. We went over our developmentally appropriate strategies to use in the classroom. And when that still isn't enough, and that still isn't working, we want to go ahead and collect our ABC data. And once we have our ABC data, we want to look at our possible functional behaviors. And when we find our possible function, we want to grab the different strategies that I mentioned today based off the function and try these strategies and see if this helps us. If this helps us to better decrease the behavior that we're seeing in the classroom. In conclusion, it's always important to know that communication is the key. You want to tell a child what to do instead of what not to do. You want to show the child by modeling and using a picture of the action. Remember, clearly and simply state what you expect the child to do or have the rules available with those visuals. Remember that young children use inappropriate behavior because they may not understand the social rules yet, so we want to teach them those social rules. Encourage children in a way that lets them know that they are exhibiting the desired behavior. Be enthusiastic and generous with encouragement. Children can't get enough of that. Instead of telling them stop running, use your walking feet. Great job, Tommy. You are using your walking feet in the hallways. That's how you provide or encourage that child in a way that helps them exhibit the desired behavior. And always, always, always use preventative strategies and remain proactive. When we're proactive, we're better equipped to assist those kids with those challenging behaviors so that they never even have to come into contact with those challenging behaviors. We want to make sure we're offering those choices as well because we know that will help decrease those challenging behaviors as well in the classroom. It's up to us. We can have order in our classrooms or we can have chaos. The answer to this is making sure that predictability is key in our classroom. That's something that we always have to remember when moving forward. Once again, I do thank you guys for attending this training on strategies to minimize the behaviors in the preschool classroom. My name is Sulinda and my email address is listed above. If you have any questions or concerns or would like to pick my brain about anything, feel free to contact me at any time. Once again, thank you so much for attending the training on strategies to minimize the behaviors in the classroom, in the preschool classroom. I hope you found something that will assist you and prepare you to go into your classroom tomorrow and be able to work through those challenging behaviors. Thank you guys. Goodbye.